Hey everybody, today we're going to be making a project that looks at old school books called illuminated manuscripts. And illuminated manuscripts looked a little bit like this. Pay attention to the first letter and how it's drawn to include a picture in these examples. We're going to be using that same idea, but we're going to be doing it with a little bit more flair and a little bit of graffiti. Alright guys, if you're at all like me, you're probably not much for using too much math in the art room. So let's go ahead and use the ruler together to draw out our border. Do on your paper what I'm about to do here. First thing we need to know is that on our rulers, the 0-inch marking is right there. So that's the piece that we actually need to line up with the edge of our paper to get our 2-inch border. First thing I'm going to do, move it up to the top left corner. I line up my 0-inch with the left side of my paper. I find the 2-inch mark right there, and I make a light dot above it. I'm going to draw my dots a little bit darker so you guys can see them on the camera. Because we're using a 12-inch ruler, our 12-inch should be over here lined up with the right side of our paper. So if you think about it, if we've got a 12-inch piece of paper and we need a 2-inch border, 12 minus 2 gives us 10. So make a dot right there above 10. Yours should now look something like this. Repeat that on the bottom. Now because our paper is longer than our ruler is, we need some extra marks here in the middle. Easiest way to do that, find your 0-inch mark again, line it up with the left side of your paper, and make a dot right there at 2 inches, and repeat again on the right side of your paper at 10 inches. So now you've got 3 dots on both sides of your paper. Here's how we connect them. Line both this dot and this dot up and draw a line. Put your ruler back on this dot right here. Line your ruler up with the dot on the bottom and connect them. Repeat that on the right side. You should be looking at something that looks like that. Now to get our 2 inches on top and our 2 inches down at the bottom, we're going to put our ruler back, and this time you're going to line up that 0-inch marking with the top of your paper. Put your ruler back on this pencil line right here, make a dot at 2 inches, and repeat that on the right hand side one more time. Line up that dot with this dot, connect them. Same thing on the bottom, except this time we can turn our ruler sideways. 0 inches gets lined up with the bottom of my paper. Ruler goes back up on my pencil line, mark off 2 inches, slide it over to the right hand side, and do it again. Connect those 2 dots. When you're all done, your border should look a little bit like this. Now this is where you're either going to choose a complex pattern, or you're going to choose to draw images from your song, poem, quote, book, whatever. If you look at the example that's up there on the board under the dot cam, obviously I chose to do a pattern in mine. Right here is where you're going to graffiti the first large word of whatever you've chosen to do, whether it be a poem or a quote, so on and so forth. The rest of the inside of this box is where you're going to write out all the text. Now let me show you some more examples. So when I started working on this one, what I did was I took the first interesting longer word out of the Lumineers song, Ho Hey, and it says trying. And after I got that first part graffitied, what I did out here with the text was I began to rewrite some of the words. You're not going to have enough space on your project to fit all of it, and obviously mine's still in progress. Now I'd be willing to bet some of us are having a hard time seeing the letters here. Here's my T. Here's my R, Y, I, there's the dot on top of the I, N, and G. As you can tell here, this is where I did my complex patterned border, and my writing is still relatively legible inside here. Alright guys, everything that you see here in green, starting with number 1, is what you need to copy down into your sketchbook. This is going to help you remember what you need to know as we go through the project. This template right here is going to be hanging on the board until we're done. It's going to tell you everything you need to know. Over here on the sides is where you need to make your 2-inch margins. This is where you illustrate or use your patterns, and you must completely and neatly fill it in. Your graffitied first word goes here, and then your text goes through the rest of this box nice and neat. If you look here, it says you can make your letters between 1.5 and 2 inches. These guys up here, this O is about 3/4 of an inch. This F is just under 2 inches. So if you think about that, you're not necessarily going to be writing everything from your poem, song, or story here. But you do have to sketch it out neatly in pencil first to make sure it's going to look neat and legible. One of the hardest parts about writing in a style like this is that for the last 7 years you guys have been in school, we've all been telling you to write so we can read it. If you can draw bubble letters, cool. You're actually already at the second step for this. But if we needed extra practice, let me show you how to do it. Anytime you're going to start letters, write them out just like you normally would, but do it nice and light so you can erase it in step number 2. Once you've got your word or your letter written out normally, all you have to do after that is just trace around exactly what you wrote in that first step. It's probably going to be a little bit helpful for you if you erase the inside as you go. Once you're at step number 2, there's really nothing that you can't do to these letters to make them harder to read. Whatever you can imagine is going to work just fine to do to these letters. With this project in particular, working big is actually going to be easier for you. So write that word maybe just a little bit bigger than you think you actually need it. I'm going to show you how to take these 3 letters and make them abstracted, which means harder to read, but do it in a very simple way. And I can do that by just erasing a line straight through the middle of each letter, just like that. And what I can do is I can split each letter in half, and in this case, I'm going to split it in half so it looks kind of like a puzzle piece. We're well on our way to making something that's more difficult to read. Another easy tip to make these letters more graffiti-like is to add some little tiny highlights at the top by making a triangle, and right next to it kind of a rounded off square. Down here at the bottom, I'm going to make another outline around my letters. What we've got here would be sufficient for a very, very simplistic approach to making your graffitied words. Another tip, when you're working on your letters, is to overlap them, which means one letter looks like it's touching another letter. Another quick, easy fix to making these a little bit more graffiti-like is to take the end of each letter and make it super bubbly and chubby. Kind of like I did to that C right there. Quick tip about looking on the internet for lyrics or a poem or pieces of a story. Go to Google, type in the word lyrics. If you know the artist of the song, type them in, and if you know the song name, type that in as well. If you're at all unsure if it's a school appropriate song, do not use it and do not search for it. The same goes for poems and stories. Examples of stuff that would be not appropriate to use on this project would be anything with bad language, if it talks about guns or blood, gore, anything like that. If you're not sure if it's school appropriate, it's probably not. Don't use it. A lot of kids ask why graffiti is so hard to read. Think about it like this. If you're an artist, the longer you can have people spend looking at your work, the better off you're going to be. And the more people recognize your work, the more they're going to appreciate it. So that's why graffiti artists typically ended up making stuff that was super complex and hard to read with lots of colors. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in depth next week.